There comes a moment in these relationships when you are too tired to keep explaining, too drained to keep proving your intentions, and too hurt to keep chasing someone who keeps moving the target. And that moment can feel confusing, because part of you expects relief, but another part of you is bracing for impact. You stop texting first. You stop begging to be understood. You stop trying to fix the distance, the tension, the coldness, the mixed signals. And strangely, that is often the exact moment they panic. Not when they hurt you. Not when they ignored you. Not when they watched you fall apart trying to hold the relationship together. They panic when you stop chasing. If you have lived this, you already know how disorienting it feels. For so long, you were the one carrying the emotional weight. You were the one checking in, apologizing, reaching out, smoothing things over, trying to make sense of things that never fully made sense. You may have thought that if you just found the right words, stayed more patient, showed more love, or made fewer mistakes, the relationship would become safe and steady. But what you were responding to was not a normal misunderstanding. You were caught inside a pattern that depended on your pursuit. That is one of the hardest truths to accept, because it means the relationship was not being held together by mutual care. It was being held together by imbalance. Your effort was doing the work that honesty, respect, and emotional responsibility were supposed to do. So when you finally stopped chasing, it did not just change the energy. It exposed the structure. It revealed that the connection may have depended far more on your labor than on their love. When a narcissistic person panics after you pull back, it is not usually because they suddenly discovered your value in a healthy, mature way. More often, it is because your withdrawal threatens something they rely on. The main issue is not love. It is control, validation, and access. As long as you are chasing, they know they still have emotional access to you. They know they can create distance and watch you close it. They know they can wound you and still remain at the center of your mind. Your pursuit reassures them that they matter, that they still have power, that they can affect your emotions whenever they want. That chase becomes part of the emotional system. You feel anxious, so you reach for them. They pull away, so you move closer. They become inconsistent, so you work harder to restore stability. Over time, your chasing starts to regulate the relationship. It keeps them from having to face themselves. It keeps them from having to offer real accountability. It keeps the focus on your reactions instead of their behavior. And because this pattern repeats so many times, they come to expect it. So the moment you stop, something important happens. The script breaks. They are no longer sure where they stand. They are no longer receiving the constant proof that they still occupy your thoughts. They are no longer able to use your distress as evidence of their importance. And that can trigger panic, not always visible panic, but panic underneath the surface. Sometimes it looks dramatic. Sometimes it looks subtle. Sometimes it comes as love bombing, sudden apologies, emotional confessions, promises to change, or unexpected warmth. Other times it comes as anger, blame, guilt, accusations, or attempts to make you jealous. The form can change, but the purpose is often the same: restore the old dynamic. This is important to understand, because many people misread that panic is real transformation. They think, now they finally see what they lost. Now they finally understand my worth. Now they are fighting for me. But panic is not the same as insight. Fear of losing control is not the same as genuine love. Urgency is not the same as emotional growth. A person can react intensely to your absence and still not be capable of treating you well. They can become desperate without becoming accountable. Part of the reason this panic is so strong is because your chasing gave them a stable emotional position. In many narcissistic dynamics, there are emotional roles. One person chases. One person withholds. One person explains. One person stays vague. One person tries to repair. One person creates the damage and then acts confused by the reaction. These roles may not be spoken out loud, but they become deeply familiar. And when you stop performing your role, they feel destabilized. They may suddenly start doing things they refused to do before. They may reach out more. They may ask where you have been. They may seem softer, more open, more attentive. But often this is not because they developed empathy overnight. It is because your distance creates uncertainty, and uncertainty is hard for people who depend on control. Your silence forces them into a position they are not comfortable with. Now they are the one who does not know. Now they are the one who has to wonder. Now they are the one without immediate access to your emotional state. That reversal can feel intolerable to them. And if you are a thoughtful, caring person, this is where you can get pulled back in. Because the second they react, your hope wakes up. You think, maybe this is the breakthrough. Maybe this is what needed to happen. Maybe if I just stay a little longer, things will finally become real. But what usually happens is not a true breakthrough. It is a temporary response to losing supply. When they feel secure again, the old behavior often returns. The warmth fades. The effort drops. The confusion comes back. And you are left trying to recover from another cycle, wondering why you believed it again. That does not mean you were foolish. It means you were human. People who have been emotionally manipulated often blame themselves for being pulled back in, but that misses what is really happening. You are responding to intermittent reinforcement. You are responding to hope being activated and then withdrawn. You are responding to moments of closeness placed in between pain and distance. That creates a powerful attachment, not because the relationship is healthy, but because unpredictability can keep the nervous system locked in. This is why stopping the chase can feel so unnatural at first. It is not just a decision. It is a withdrawal from a pattern that trained your emotions to stay alert. You may feel guilty for going quiet. You may feel cruel for not responding. You may feel anxious because peace feels unfamiliar. You may even start missing them more the moment you create space. That does not mean you made the wrong choice. It often means your body is adjusting to the absence of a cycle it had learned to survive. When they panic, they may use several strategies to pull you back into your old role. One common strategy is sudden vulnerability. They may act wounded, lost, depressed, or broken in ways that make you feel responsible again. Another is rewriting history. They may speak as if the relationship problems were mutual in equal ways, even if you spent months carrying the emotional burden. Another is urgency. They may create the feeling that this is the last chance, the final moment, the one opportunity to save everything. Another is provocation. If softness does not work, they may try to upset you just enough that you react, because even a negative reaction can restore the sense that they still have access. What matters is not just what they say. It is what the pattern shows. Do they take responsibility without shifting blame? Do they show consistent change over time, or only intense effort when they feel you slipping away? Do they respect your boundary, or do they treat your boundary as a challenge to overcome? Do they care about your healing, or mainly about getting their position back? These questions matter more than any dramatic message or emotional moment. A narcissistic person often panics because your withdrawal forces them to confront a reality they were avoiding. They may have believed you would always come back. They may have built their confidence on the assumption that no matter how far they pushed, you would still reach. They may have mistaken your loyalty for weakness and your empathy for permission. So when you stop chasing, they do not just lose attention. They lose the illusion of unlimited access. They lose the comfort of assuming they can wound you without consequence. And this is where your clarity begins to grow. Not because everything becomes easy, but because you start to see that their panic says something important. It tells you the chase mattered more than you were told. It tells you your energy had value. It tells you the relationship was not as one-sided in influence as it felt. You may have felt powerless while you were begging for crumbs, but the moment you stepped back, the entire system reacted. That reaction is evidence that your presence was never small. At the same time, it is important not to confuse your power with the ability to change them. Your power is not in making them panic. Your power is not in winning, proving a point, or becoming emotionally unavailable just to make them suffer. Real power here is quieter than that. It is the ability to see clearly and choose differently. It is the ability to stop offering your nervous system as a workplace for someone else's instability. It is the ability to no longer measure your worth by how desperately someone tries to regain access once you leave. A lot of healing begins when you stop asking, "Why are they doing this now?" and start asking, "What happens to me when I re-enter this cycle?" That question brings the focus back to reality. Because whatever their panic means for them, the deeper issue is what the relationship has been doing to you. Has it made you doubt yourself? Has it trained you to over-explain? Has it made you afraid of silence, afraid of conflict, afraid of disappointing someone who rarely protected your heart? Has it made you confuse emotional intensity with connection? These are the places where healing needs to happen. Recognizing the pattern does not always bring immediate peace. Sometimes it brings grief. You may have to face how much effort you gave to someone who only became attentive when you detached. You may have to accept that what felt intimate was often a system of control mixed with occasional tenderness. You may have to let go of the fantasy that one perfect conversation would finally make them understand your pain. That grief is real. But it is also clean. It is the kind of pain that leads somewhere honest. As you step back emotionally, you may notice something else. Their panic often becomes less impressive once you stop personalizing it. The dramatic message, the sudden affection, the emotional urgency, the anger, the indirect posts, the guilt, the false crisis, the unexpected kindness, all of it starts to look different when you understand the pattern beneath it. You stop seeing each behavior as a separate event and start seeing the larger design. And that shift matters, because manipulation survives on confusion. It becomes weaker when it is named clearly. This is where boundaries become essential. Boundaries are not punishments. They are not revenge. They are not an attempt to control the other person. A boundary is simply the point where you stop participating in what harms you. It might look like no longer responding to bait. It might look like ending conversations that become circular. It might look like refusing to explain the same wound for the 20th time. It might look like blocking access if contact keeps reopening the injury. It might look like choosing distance without needing them to agree that it is justified. The deeper strength in boundaries is that they protect your clarity. Without boundaries, you can understand the pattern in theory and still get dragged back into it emotionally. Boundaries help your insight become action. They create enough space for your nervous system to settle, enough quiet for your thoughts to organize, enough distance for the truth to stay visible. And once you have that space, something starts to change inside you. You become less available for emotional chaos. You become less impressed by inconsistency dressed up as passion. You stop calling breadcrumbs effort. Calm detachment is often the stage that scares people, because it feels unfamiliar. You may worry that you are becoming cold. But calm detachment is not coldness. It is self-respect without panic. It is seeing clearly without needing to fight. It is no longer arguing with someone whose confusion serves them. It is no longer chasing closure from the person who created the wound. It is not pretending you never cared. It is caring enough about yourself to stop bleeding in places that never intended to heal you. And this is often the real reason the panic increases when you stop chasing. Your calm changes the entire dynamic. As long as you were activated, the pattern could continue. As long as you were pleading, proving, waiting, and reacting, they still had the version of you that revolved around them. But when you become steady, when you stop feeding the push-pull, when you stop treating every shift in their mood as an emergency, they lose the emotional leverage they once counted on. If you are in this stage right now, remind yourself of something simple and important: you do not need their panic to validate your decision. You do not need a dramatic reaction to prove that the relationship was unhealthy. You do not need them to chase you back in order to know you mattered. The truth is not created by their response. The truth was already there in the exhaustion, the confusion, the imbalance, and the pain you kept trying to explain away. Healing after this kind of dynamic is not about becoming harder. It is about becoming clearer. It is about trusting your perception again. It is about learning that love does not require you to abandon yourself. It is about understanding that real connection does not depend on one person constantly restoring emotional balance while the other disrupts it. It is about letting your body learn what consistency feels like, what safety feels like, what mutuality feels like. You may still miss them sometimes. You may still replay certain memories. You may still wonder who they could have been if they had truly wanted to grow. That is normal. Missing someone does not mean the pattern was healthy. Grieving what you hoped for does not mean you should return to what hurt you. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is allow the sadness without turning it into a reason to go back. In the end, their panic is not the most important part of the story. Your awakening is. The moment you stop chasing is not just the moment they lose control. It is the moment you begin to return to yourself. It is the moment you start seeing that your energy is precious, your attention is valuable, and your peace is not something to keep trading away in exchange for temporary closeness. You do not have to beg to be chosen, and you do not have to prove your worth to someone who only notices it when they cannot reach it as easily. The peace you are looking for does not come from finally being understood by the person who kept misunderstanding you. It comes from stepping out of the cycle and telling yourself the truth. You were not too much. You were carrying too much. You were not impossible to love. You were trying to find stability in a place that depended on your instability. And now you get to do something different. You get to become harder to confuse, slower to abandon yourself, and more protective of your inner life. That is not bitterness. That is healing. That is strength. And that is how you move forward, not chasing, not proving, not waiting, but standing in a kind of peace they could never offer and no longer get to disturb.